Notion just shipped probably the fastest way to make and share a form online that you have ever seen. I'm going to demonstrate it right now before we get into all the details. If I create a new page in Notion, type /form, there is my form. It is already created. I'm just going to call it my form. If I share the form like this and set it to anyone on the web with the link can access it, now it's public on the web. I can copy that link, head over to a browser, and open it up just like that. Probably the fastest way to create a form I've ever seen. So let's go ahead and put in some dummy answers here. I want to eat bacon, and we'll go with option 2 here. Submit that bad boy. And if we go back over to Notion, we can go to our responses, and you can see that responses get automatically mapped to database properties. Here is our title property with the I want to eat bacon suggestion. We can see the respondent was anonymous, and we have a select property for question 2. You can, of course, also embed forms on other Notion pages, including public pages like Notion sites. So for example, here I have a video editing interest form, and I've made this form public, as you can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my clipboard. And then over here, I have this public Notion site called Thomas Frank Internet Video Editor. This is basically a portfolio of my editing work. And if I was a freelance video editor, I would make something like this and make it public. So at the bottom of this page, I'm going to go ahead and paste that public form link, embed it, and now it's directly on my web page. So because it is public, I can go to the Share tab. Within this Publish tab here, I can copy this URL, and then I can paste it into my browser, and anybody on the internet will be able to see this web page, come all the way down to the bottom, and fill out this form if they wanted to hire me for editing work. So in this video, we are going to do a deep dive into everything that Notion Forms will allow you to do. And I'm actually going to use Notion Forms to upgrade my own copy of Creator's Companion, which is our video planning and content planning workspace and template that I've created for my YouTube content, for my streams, everything that we create under my media empire. And hopefully in doing this, you're going to see basically everything that Notion Forms can do, and you're going to get to see a practical example of how we would use it in action. And I've got a plan to do 2 different forms. First, we're going to make a form that is actually public, where you'll be able to submit topic suggestions and questions, template suggestions, anything like that. And then I'm going to create a second form, which will be used for internal suggestions from my team. And that will show you a few more of the advanced features that Notion Forms allows you to access. So right here, this is our copy of Creator's Companion. I've got all of these different content projects I'm working on. And if I go over to my ideas area, down here, we have this audience ideas database. And I would like to add a form to this database so then I can share that form link on stream, and I can get audience suggestions, template ideas, that kind of thing directly on the form. The first thing that I will mention, I'm going to zoom in a couple of ticks here. The first thing I'll mention is that to create a form on an existing database, we actually have to create it on the source database. So what we're looking at right here is a linked database view of my audience ideas database. So if I go to create a new view right here, I'm not going to see forms. However, if I just go ahead and create a dummy suggestion here, I'm just going to call this dummy, and I go into it, I can open this as a full page, and I can go directly to my audience submissions source database. And once I'm at the source database, I can click plus right here. You may want to unlock your database if it's already locked, and I can go to form to add a form directly to this database. Now, because this is already an existing database, we're going to see this question right here, auto create form questions based on existing properties. So this is going to create questions based on the properties that already exist. But if I want, I can start from scratch and not have those questions automatically created. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I want to get a little bit fancier with the questions than just going off of these few properties I already have. I want to actually take advantage of the power of forms to allow people to say what they're suggesting, to kind of categorize the type of suggestion, and to maybe even subscribe to my email newsletter while they're filling out the form itself. So over in the form builder, we can start to fill out all the details, give it a title, and then start creating questions here. I'm going to go ahead and call this video suggestion form. And maybe I want to be a bit more generic with it, actually. I want to give people the ability to also ask questions or maybe even submit template ideas. So let's call this Thomas Frank's suggestion form, exclamation point, and we'll give it a quick little description here. And now that we have the description filled out, we can start creating our actual form questions and binding them to database properties. Now I have a little idea for the name property, which is the actual sort of title property here. I think I want this to be essentially blank when forms get submitted. And the reason for that is I think I want to go through and actually give a sort of summarized title for the submission. And I want to build a sort of queue where I can actually send my form submissions from this audience submissions database directly to my actual content ideas database. We're going to use an automation to do that, actually a button later in the video. But to start that off, I'm going to go ahead and leave that actually blank. And I want to create a new property that is of type text. And I'm going to call this submission. And what I also want to see is if I can create new properties directly from the form itself as well. So let's go down here and see what we can do. Let's go with submission. I think I'm also going to create a type property so people can denote if their submission is a question or a template suggestion or something else. So let's go ahead and add a new one. And instead of going to the existing property this time, let's go ahead and do a, let's see here. Do we have a select property we can go with? We do have multiple choice. Well, let's see if we can do a single choice. Max selection. So max selection, we can go from unlimited to 1. It's probably going to create a select property instead of a multi-select property. And I think I want to make this required as well. So let's say what type of suggestion, and let's add some options. We'll go with video topic question, template suggestion, and something else. Maybe they want to say that I have a dumb hair. So now people can say what kind of suggestion they're making. They can actually make their suggestion. Let's go ahead and ask for their first name. We'll make that required as well. And then to set ourselves up for some future marketing automation, I'm going to add one more question, which will be of an email type property. I will not make this required, but I am going to allow people to sign up for my email newsletter while they're submitting the form. Okay, so now we have a basic form, and I want this form to be publicly available. So all I need to do that is go up to share form. And right now I have who can fill out set to anyone at College Info Geek with the link. So essentially right now, this is going to be accessible to anybody in my workspace. But if I open this up, I can actually change it to anyone on the web with the link. And now the form itself is public. And I want to make a distinction here because what we're looking at the moment is actually the form builder. So because this database isn't public on the web, and you can see that I do not have it published right here, the builder itself would not be accessible, and the entire database is not accessible. This is actually something quite new with Notion. We are creating a form, which is sort of part of a database that can be public, even though the underlying database where the responses are going to go are not public. And that's pretty cool. So I'm going to leave this database private, just private to my workspace, but I now have this public link. And if I go over to, say, Microsoft Edge, my browser, I can paste it in, and here is our form now public on the web. So I'm going to go ahead and do a dummy submission. Let's say Steve O is making a submission. Best bacon cooking methods. Steve O should actually be there. And let's say Steve O does not want to join my Notion Tips newsletter, so he's going to not put in an email, just submit that. And if we go back over to Notion, we should now be able to go to our active submissions. And there it is, Steve O with a submission, his first name, and we have a nice little created date as well, along with the topic suggestion type. So I'm going to go back to the form builder, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this question here because I don't actually want it. Now, one thing that I've noticed is when we get rid of that title question there, we aren't going to get a blank submission. We're just going to get a new submission sort of placeholder text in there, but that's totally fine. I want to basically reserve this for a title that I'm going to create while going through these submissions myself for a little bit later on. So at this point, we now have a public form, and I want to show you a couple of things you can do to customize that form before we go on to the second one. First and foremost, if you want to preview the form before you actually share it out, here's a preview button right here, and that's just going to open it directly in the browser. But you can also customize the form just a little bit. If you go to this little three-dot menu, we have automations. If you are paying for a paid Notion plan, you can create automations here. But we also have this customize form button or section. And if we want to, we can change the color. So if we want to, we can make this blue. We also have text for the submit button. So let's just change this to letter rip. And then we have confirmation title and confirmation body. So let's say received here, and there's our confirmation body. And now what I want to do is move on to the second form we're going to build in this video, because there are some additional things you can do if you have other types of properties in your database, especially if you are using the form builder to create forms that you're going to be sharing internally, like with your team or your company. So now that we have the audience submissions form created, I'm going to go back to my content area, and I want to create a second form that's actually on my content database. So here you can see we have all of these different projects that are in process. These are our streams, our YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. We also have an ideas area. This is basically anything that's been added to this database by myself or someone on my team that has a status type of idea. So what I want to do is create a form that will add directly to this database and create new pages that have that idea status. So once again, I do need to open up a page as a full width or just sort of full page so I can navigate to the source database via the breadcrumbs. I'm going to go ahead and hide that description once again. And once again, I can create a form directly from this source database. I don't want to create 36 questions. That probably isn't going to be very useful. So I'm going to once again start from scratch. I'm going to call this internal topic suggestion form. And this is going to be shared in my Slack or in my Discord, basically with anybody who's actually a member in my Notion workspace. So here, because this is my team, I'm actually going to trust them to give good descriptive titles. And let's make sure this is actually linked to the title property. So we have question type title. That means there's only one linked property that it could possibly be bound to, but we can see right there, type title, cool. And if we go over to table, we can see we've actually renamed the title property of the database, which I actually don't like. So I'm going to name that back to name. And sync with property name. That is something we can turn off so that we would get a custom title here, but we don't change the title property in our database, which could be problematic if we have other API automations that we're using. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as name. And I want to add some additional properties here. So we can see we have 31 different properties that we can add. I'm just going to go ahead and peruse these a little bit and see if I can find media type. That's going to be a good one. So this will allow people to say this is going to be a long form piece of content, maybe a short, maybe a stream. We'll add another question here, which binds to our description property. This is where they can actually add a little bit more detail about the idea. Once again, I do not want to sync with the property name. That way I can get an actual descriptive question here. And then something that I didn't show you on the public form, if we add another question, we can actually bind questions to relation properties. And that's going to create a dropdown showing you all the different pages in that database relation. So in our case, and I would love to see a type to filter here, by the way, if anyone from Notion is watching. In our case, we have a channel relation, and I want to use that to allow people on my team to suggest which channel this piece of content should go on. And I'm going to make this required. I'll go ahead and give it a title there. And finally, just to showcase what you can do with forms, I think we also have a files and media property. There it is. And this will actually allow you to upload a picture if you want to. So I'm going to go ahead and name this as well to make sure it's not synced. It is not. Cool. Okay, so now we have created an internal form, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this on anyone at College Info Geek with the link is the people who can fill it out. If I copy it, we can go over to Edge, and assuming that I am logged into Notion, which I do believe I am, we should be able to actually fill it out. And it looks like this actually brings me directly into Notion. So unlike with the public form, this was just sort of this page that looks pretty much like a public Notion site, we actually see a submittable area, not the builder, but an actual copy of the form we can submit to directly inside of our Notion workspace. And I should be able to hide the sidebar just like that. So let's go ahead and do a topic suggestion here. We'll do llama training tips. This is obviously going to be a long form piece of content. You cannot tame llamas in under 30 seconds, so no shorts here. Let's give it a bit of a description here. There we go. Perfect description, 10 out of 10, no notes. And then what channel should this go on? Now, if I open this up, I should get basically the relation picker that I see in any other database. I think this should probably be a class, actually. And I could add more if I wanted to. And then if I wanted to, I get a standard image uploader as well, where I could easily drop an image in as well. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this form. And because I have access to this workspace, I can even view my response directly. So there is basically just an alternate way for people on my team to very easily add new pages to a database. And I think most people on my team maybe aren't going to need this in most cases because my company is very Notion focused. Everyone on my team knows Notion very well, but I could see this being very useful for a larger organization where you have many people that are technically members of a Notion workspace, but they maybe don't know Notion quite as well. They might not know to look in this little property panel for all of these different properties. And so you can create a form that makes submitting new ideas way easier for people who just don't use Notion all that often. Okay, so now we've created both an internal form and an external form which we can share. The next thing that I want to do is make the external form way easier to share by giving it a short URL. So this is going to be kind of like a bonus tip in the video. This isn't something that is specific to Notion, but if we go back to our audience submissions database, we can see what our problem is right now. If we share the form, we have this really, really long URL slug, and unlike with Notion sites, we are currently unable to give this a custom slug. Have no fear though, because there are a ton of different web services and apps out there that can make it very easy to create sort of branded short links. And one of them that I just started trying the other day is called dub.co. So I'm going to go over to dub.co, and they have a free plan where you can very easily create a link just like this. You can paste the link in, and you can even bind a custom domain to it. So I've got thomas.lol, and I might just call this suggestions. Now, instead of creating this link here, I want to show you something else you can do that's really cool. Instead of going to dub.co's website, there is actually a Raycast extension if you're a Mac OS user, and I am. So I'm going to do dub, shorten link, tab over to that, put in my URL. The key, I think, is going to be suggestion. And then I'm going to switch over to my custom domain, create that bad boy, and now it is on my clipboard. Just like that, you have a branded short link, which you can share wherever you want. I'm going to go ahead and put it right in my stream chat where I'm recording this video right now, and anybody can suggest whatever they want in that form going forward. The next thing I want to do isn't so much related to forms, but I think is going to be a really, really cool extra bit of functionality in our workspace, and maybe you will want to enable it as well. Essentially, I want to take, like I said before, these suggestions from our public form. I want to set up a queue of sorts, and I want to basically allow myself to hit approve on ideas I like and automatically create new pages in my actual content database from those audience submissions. So to do that, we are going to create some Notion buttons. We're going to create a reject button, and we're going to create a approve button. And our approve button is actually going to create new pages in content using some of the content from the audience suggestion here. So to do that, I'm going to first create myself a brand new view. Let's call this table. And actually, I don't want to link a database. I think I should just be able to maybe duplicate this one. That'll be a little bit better. I'm going to call this Q. And let's find ourselves, let's see here. Is there an ellipsis icon? Yes, there is. That looks good for Q. And we want to add at least one more property to this database, which is going to represent the status of the submission. So let's find a status property here. I'm going to use a status type property because I want to have a default value at all times. I don't want that to ever be empty. And we're going to set the middle one as the default, and we'll call this not reviewed. So our Q view is going to have all of our not reviewed submissions. Let's go ahead and make that gray or light gray. I think light gray is going to be good. And then we're going to have a rejected status. So if we just don't want to make this video or the question just isn't useful, we can reject it and we'll send it to a rejected view. And we're going to also have a approved status as well. And so any suggestion that is approved is going to get the approved status, and then it is also going to have some of its data ported over to our actual internal content database. So now that we have our status property, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of button properties. One of these is going to be called rejected. And this is, if you haven't seen it before, a fairly new property type in Notion databases. And with it, you can create a custom button that when you click it, it's going to run an automation. So let's call this reject. And this automation is going to be very simple. When this button is clicked, we are going to edit the property of the page where it was clicked, and we're going to change the status to rejected. Super duper simple, barely worth talking about. What's more interesting is the second button we're going to create, and this one is going to be called approve. So when this button is clicked, first and foremost, we are going to edit the status to approved, and that's going to get it out of our queue, just like the rejected status will. But then we're going to go ahead and add a page to our content database. So let's go ahead and see if we can find that. Content CIG, that is perfect. And I'm going to cover this in its own video, but we now have this little formula icon here in this little automation builder. And this is the key to everything, because in the past, we have not been able to pass context, to pass information from the trigger of the button or the trigger of the automation into whatever actions that we were creating, which meant that automations were really limited. But here we now have this formula builder, and this is going to allow us to bring context from the page where the button was triggered into, say, our name property. And so I want to, number one, custom change the name of the submission here. So it's from new submission, I'm going to change it to something that makes a bit more sense. And I want to go ahead and port whatever this is into the name property in our content database. So to do that, I can just go with this page, and then we can use this dot syntax to get access to all the page or the properties of this page. And so let's find the name property. And that's going to be it. Just going to port it right over to the name property in our content database. We can also add another property. I think description would be perfect for the submission details from this submission here. So once again, we're going to do this page, and we're going to find our submission details there. But we might want to be even a little bit fancier about this. Maybe we want to have the submission, and we also want to put the first name of the submitter in this field as well. So because we're working with formulas, we can actually get a little bit fancy. We'll open this back up, and instead of this page.submission being the only property in this formula, we can actually add additional string values. So I'm going to do plus operator. I'm going to create a couple of line breaks with \n twice, and then I'm going to add on submitter, or maybe submitted by, and we'll do plus this page dot submitter. And we can actually combine these two strings together. We don't need to have concatenation here. So let's just go ahead and combine them like that. And now when we send over our new page, we're going to have a single description property that has both the submission text and the first name of the submitter. Finally, I'm going to add one more property. We're going to set the status of this new page in our content database to idea. And just like that, if I go ahead and approve this, I've now set the title to setting up the guardrails for Notion. We're going to get approved status set on the page itself. And then if we go up to our ideas view in the content ideas database, setting up the guardrails for Notion is right there, and the status is set to idea. So now let's talk about a few of the limitations and downsides of Notion Forms, at least in its current incarnation. The first one that comes to mind for me, which is a bit of an annoyance, is that you can't currently create hidden fields with default values that will get submitted along with anything the user actually put into these fields. Basically, what you see on the form is the data that you're going to get. And this is a bit of an issue for us, especially in this internal topic suggestion form, because we have a property that marks the status of our videos. And if I open up and edit this property, you can see that the plan status is the default. And we have reasons for that. But with form submissions in particular, I would really want the status to be idea by default. And in many other form builders, we would be able to have a hidden field that would set idea as the status instead of just defaulting to that plan status. In Notion Forms, we can't currently do that. Similarly, there is no way to differentiate a form submission from a page in a database created in any other way, like just hitting the new button, which means we also can't create database automations that target only form submissions. So I really hope Notion addresses those couple of problems. The other main limitation that comes to mind is while we can embed forms on Notion pages, I don't believe right now we can embed Notion Forms on other websites. So if you've got like a Framer website or a WordPress website, right now you're not going to be able to embed a Notion form directly on it. Hopefully they'll address that in the future. And because of these limitations, I do want to briefly talk about a few alternative form builders out there. Tally.so is the one that I've used in the past. So going forward, I'll probably use Notion Forms for the automation capabilities I've shown you in this video, but Tally is very, very powerful and is very easy to embed on Notion sites and elsewhere. We also have Uform, which I've heard a lot of good things about. We've got Typeform, which as you can see, I'm on the pricing page because I was checking the pricing out on stream. Typeform is quite expensive, so it's probably not the one that I would recommend, but maybe it is useful for certain teams. And then of course we do have good old Google Forms, which is still an option. So as far as forms go, you have a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of stuff you can do. And if you wanted, say, a form directly in your browser, you could even use our browser extension Flylighter to open up essentially a form. We call it a flow, but it's essentially a form which connects directly to a Notion database and allows you to capture web clips and highlights, or even just your own ideas directly to a database from there. You've got lots and lots of form options. But like I said in the beginning of this video, I think Notion Forms is probably the simplest form option that you have at your disposal today. So would love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments. Let me know what you'd like to see Notion change and update about this feature in the future. And as always, thank you so much for watching and checking out these features with me. If you want to learn Notion, the best place to do it is at thomasjfrank.com/fundamentals. That's where you can find all of my Notion basics lessons. If you want to learn all of the basics of databases or Notion permissions, or just how to do keyboard shortcuts and write your next great American novel in Notion, that's where you can go. You can also join my Notion Tips newsletter on that page. And if you want to get updates about new tutorials that I'm putting out, new templates that I'm putting out, all kinds of stuff like that, that is the easiest way to do it. I'm also putting out newsletter updates when I'm doing big streams. So if you want to catch my live streams, which I'm actually recording this video live on stream right now, the newsletter is a great way to do it. That's all I got to say for my spiel at the end of this. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.